Welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today it is cold outside. The weather has definitely taken a turn. I can definitely feel that summer's completely gone now. We're fully into fall, and today it is time to do something that honestly I kind of dread all garden season, and that's say goodbye to the garden. Now tonight, we may not get a frost tonight. It's forecasted in my area to get down to about 35 degrees, which if that holds true, we won't actually get a frost tonight, but that is dangerously close, and if they're off by a couple degrees, we very well could get a frost tonight. We are pretty much guaranteed to get a frost tomorrow night. It's forecasted to get down to 28 degrees, so that's a hard freeze. So today we are going to just take a little walk through the garden. We are going to say goodbye to the garden. You know, honestly, the garden's kind of on its way out anyway. I think the garden is ready for a little bit of a rest. I don't know if I am as much, but it's time to let the garden go. And you know, there is still some harvest to be had out in this garden, so we're going to take a walk through the garden and we are going to salvage whatever we can before the killing frost comes, either tonight or tomorrow night. As you can see here, my butternut squashes the vines are kind of dying down anyway. We have a couple little fruits here. This one actually, it's small, but this one might actually be ready. On the other side of the trellis, I have some others that are not fully ripe yet, but we're going to harvest them and bring them in. I don't have a lot of experience with growing winter squash. If you know anything about growing winter squash, and if you know something like this, it is small, but I think that this is probably as big as it would have gotten anyway. I'm curious is that going to continue ripening inside, or is that something I can bring in and use more like a summer squash a little bit as a fresh squash as opposed to storage? I'm curious your thoughts on that. We're definitely going to bring them in and see what we can do with them, but I'm just curious what to expect. The strawberries filled out really nicely over this year. So since it was their first year, we didn't get really any significant harvest from these. But I'm thinking with the way they filled out next year, we can look for a really good strawberry harvest. That's what I'm hoping for. Now as we head over into the side yard garden, you'll see that this garden has definitely seen better days. A lot of this garden has already succumbed to the changing weather, even though we haven't had a frost yet. But we're going to dig through and see if we can find some treasures to harvest. Down in here, we've got one tiny zucchini. Ideally, this would have a couple days to get a little bit bigger, but nature has other ideas. So we're going to harvest this little baby. We've reached the time of year when most of the cherry tomatoes aren't really looking that great and aren't really worth harvesting at this point. I mean, most of them have disease. They just aren't anything that we would actually want to eat. We are going to look through the cherry tomato plants and see if we can find any tomatoes that are worth salvaging. So I don't really see any that I think will be worth saving except for a couple of these Berry's Crazy cherries here. Actually, I think this one might be a little bit questionable, but we'll look through and see. Might be one little last taste of summer. This parsley here will actually survive the frost that we're getting. It's not going to be an extremely heavy frost, so we'll be able to harvest this at least partway into winter. This basil, on the other hand, as you can see, there's not much of it left, but we're going to harvest what there is left because this will not survive the frost. So behind me, I think you can kind of see my attempted fall tomato patch. I say attempted because it really was not all that successful for us this year. Last year was actually much more successful. We have harvested a few tomatoes out of this patch, but not a lot. I'm going to go ahead and harvest everything that looks like it has a chance of turning red. So anything that has any blush on it, anything that is green but full size, we're just going to go ahead and harvest those, bring them into the house, and we're going to hope that we get some sort of tomatoes off of these. So here you can see I have a tiny little honey nut squash. This is so small, barely the size of my hand. It is starting to show some color. Now this won't survive a frost, so I am going to go ahead and bring this in. I have no idea. I've never grown this before. Now, kind of similarly to the butternut squash that I mentioned, if you know anything about honey nut squash, I think it is actually a variety of butternut, but if you know anything about it and how well it ripens inside, I mean, this is tiny, it won't be more than a little snack, but I do kind of want to try it, so we're going to bring it in. Hopefully it ripens, and we'll see how it goes. Now, all of my winter squashes that I harvested, which was not very many, as you can see, they're very small this year. So this kind of falls into the topic of next year's garden, which isn't really what this video is about. But nonetheless, I'm going to ask anyway. If anyone has tips for growing winter squash, that's something that I'm pretty new to. This is only the second year attempting it, the first year that I've actually gotten to harvest any fruits. I am hoping to be a little bit more successful last year, so I would love to hear any tips you have. I'm thinking part of it's a lack of sunlight, part of it is probably a short growing season, so I am planning to experiment with starting some transplants inside a little bit early this year instead of direct sowing them all. But if you have any other tips aside from that, I'd love to hear them. So I do have some peppers that need to be harvested. I have here, these are ahi lemon drop peppers, and these peppers will definitely not survive a frost. So we're going to harvest as many of these as we can find. So this is something else that I'm not really sure what to do with. My husband has been using them just here and there to cut up and add to tacos to give them a little spice. But now I know this isn't a lot, but I'm looking for suggestions for these. I kind of grew these on a little bit of a whim. A friend sent me some seeds and I decided to try them. I am not really fond of very spicy peppers myself, but if you have any suggestions for these, I'd love to try them. So I've got a few other peppers here. This is a poblano. As you can see, it's a little bit small, but it's not going to have time to get any larger this year. Here you can see I've got some habanada peppers. These are a heatless habanero. And these are another one I grew kind of as a novelty without a specific plan for. I'm not sure if this is a bad spot. I'll have to cut into that and find out. I've also got some here. As you can see, these aren't even ripe, but we're going to harvest them because at this point they're not going to get a chance to ripen. We'll add in a couple Anaheim peppers. Got a couple shishito peppers over here too. I don't know if it's not really enough to do anything with, but I have a couple shishito plants on my deck as well. So hopefully between the small yield and the peppers on my deck, we'll have enough to do one more side dish of blistered shishitos. Now, admittedly, these bean trellises are not really all that lovely at the moment, but there is still a really important harvest from them, and that is seeds for next year. Our bean harvest was really abundant this year, and at some point, some beans just got overgrown, and I decided just to let them go and save them for seeds because at that point we'd harvested as many as we really wanted to eat. So I have lots of bean seeds here. I'm going to go through and I'm going to harvest all the pods that you can see are kind of dried out. You can see these aren't really providing any more nutrients to the seeds, so these seeds should be developed and viable. And with the amount of bean seeds that I've been collecting from my garden, this is probably about my 7th or 8th harvest from these bean trellises here of bean seeds, not just beans for eating. I really won't have to buy any bean seeds for next year unless, of course, I find some new varieties that I want to grow, which, I mean, let's be honest, that's probably going to happen. But we're going to collect as many of these bean seeds as we can before the frost takes out these plants completely. I do want to make a quick note about these bean pods. I did do a dedicated video about saving seeds, and we talked a lot about beans in that video, so I'll link that below in case you missed it. But while these bean pods are drying out, a lot of them are not completely dry and brittle. So when I take the seeds out of them, I'm going to be sure to make sure that the seeds dry completely before storing them. If you store your seeds, say if you put them in a Ziploc bag or anything like that, and if there's any residual moisture in them, that could cause the seeds to either rot or to sprout and then lose their viability. So we want to make sure they're completely 100% dry before we actually package them up. We're about to head up to the deck and harvest some peppers and other vegetables that I have growing over there. But before we leave this main garden area, there's one more thing I want to harvest, and that's a little cut flower bouquet. So many of these flowers are so beautiful right now. It's just a shame to think that the frost is going to kill them. So we're going to harvest what we can and hold on to summer a little bit longer inside the house. Now up here on the deck, I've got quite a bit to harvest too, mostly peppers. See, I've got a couple of these Corno de Toros. I've got some more of the heatless habanada peppers up here. We're just gonna go through the deck and harvest what we can before the frost takes it. Some of these have a little bit of bad spots that needs to be cut off, but the rest of that should still be completely usable. So I've got one more beautiful Lesia pepper. These were really delicious. We really enjoyed these this year. A couple more of these long skinny Corbaci peppers. And this one is not fully ripe, but I'm gonna harvest that too. And we've got a couple more down here. We're gonna get as much as we can. So in my area here in Connecticut, rosemary does not survive the winter. So I have my 2 rosemary plants. I always grow my rosemary in pots every year so that it's really easy to bring inside for the winter. So those will be coming inside with me tonight. I'm going to kind of bring them in and out until it gets really cold, and then when it gets really cold, they'll stay inside with me all winter long. So here I've got another shishito plant with a handful of peppers on it. I think, as you can see, some of these have actually ripened. But I think between these and the plant in the garden, we might be able to do enough for a small side dish of blister shishitos tonight. I also have a couple ginger plants here that I bring in for the winter. We might actually be harvesting some of this ginger really soon because in the next couple days, I'm hoping to do a big herbal medicine day where we get a lot of our winter herbal medicine ready. And I will definitely be needing some ginger for that. Now, I have no idea how much ginger to expect from a plant this size. I do have a couple more plants on the deck. But we'll take a look and hopefully we'll have enough for all our winter herbal remedies. So one thing I had thought about doing was trying to bring a couple pepper plants inside for the winter. I've seen a technique where if you cut off all the foliage, cut down the majority of the plant and make sure all the leaves are removed, and then you uproot the plant and cut the root ball down to a much smaller size, you can basically pot it into a smaller pot and store it. Some people give it a light source over the winter and some people try to keep it dormant in maybe their basement or garage or something. I had thought about trying that this year. Again, I've never tried that before. If you have any experience with that, by the time you see this video probably won't air for about a week or so. So by the time you see this video, I will have had my frost and I will have decided what I'm going to do about that. If I'm going to try to save pepper plants or not. But it would be great to hear any experiences that you guys have if you've tried that, whether it's been successful, not successful, any tips you have, so that I know for the future, and so that anyone watching this video can get tips as well. If I do end up trying that, I'll definitely fill you in on how it goes. As I said, it kind of depends on how ambitious I am, whether or not I get to that. So this is our harvest. I mean, it's actually Halloween today, so for being the very end of October, and our frost coming really soon, I'm actually really surprisingly impressed with this harvest. Normally here in Connecticut at this point, we've already had our first frost a couple weeks ago. So basically all of this is really bonus harvest, and I'm going to appreciate it for all it's worth. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you enjoyed gardening with me this season. I hope that you'll stick with me as we get ready to start planning next year's garden. The time's gonna be on us before we know it. And in the meantime, I've got lots of fun kitchen adventures and herbal medicine adventures planned, so I definitely hope that you will stick around. So I hope you're having a great day. I hope you had an amazing gardening season, and I can't wait to see you again soon. I'll see you next time.